Welcome everybody. Tim Edwards calling in from Dallas. I've brought back an old school topic, and back in the day when I was training a lot of people, thousands and thousands of people nationwide, this was one of two of the most popular topics that I ever did. And so I wanted to bring it out because it really helps people catch the vision of what's possible. And it helps a lot of people. Some people know that they're at that point in their career where they realize that they've started to become something special, and they're on their way to being a champion. But for some of us, it hasn't really struck us yet, or maybe there's a little bit of doubt. So I want to go over today, what makes a champion, and you're going to have a totally different outlook on this subject when we finish. Have you ever heard somebody say to another person, you've missed your calling, meaning they have skills maybe that might apply really, really well to something else besides what they're doing. I like to give the example, if you come across, a CPA who's typically kind of reserved, but then you see one that's really outgoing, right, that just, seems like they should be in sales, and so, that's what I mean by someone maybe missing their calling. But in this business, in direct sales, it's usually quite the opposite. You've got skills to do other things, but they don't really apply to this type of business, and you really can't get the outcome that you want with your current skills. And of course, your dreams and your goals, if you've got skills in something, typically that skill set or that career path doesn't allow you to get your dreams and your goals. They're kind of out of reach. So you end up here, right? And you're looking at this huge opportunity, and a lot of times when you first see it, it doesn't really strike you, but as you dig in, you start to see the enormity, the possibilities with direct sales. And it kind of, for a lot of people, it's a little bit unsettling, right? You get this feeling. And instead of it being, you missed your calling, it's like the voice of greatness has called you and you're afraid to answer. Well, think about this. Here's what that means. You see this huge opportunity, right? You get it. This is your shot. And these are the right people, so things look like everything is in place, right? You're at the right place at the right time with the right people. Some of the people that are in the program are going to be hugely successful. And then you wonder, do I have what it takes? Maybe you've tried things before. Maybe you've had things kind of knock you down in life. And sometimes, we become our own worst enemy, right? Some of us beat ourselves up with the negative self-talk. And here's the first thing that you must do, is number one, forgive yourself for any past failures, and replace that negative self-talk with consistent, positive reinforcement like you are right now today, right? Stay plugged into stuff that helps feed your mind correctly. And first, be happy, right? Just be happy that you're here and that you even have a shot, because some people are in the same boat you're in. They haven't got the call. They haven't got the invitation, and they may not get it next month, next year. They may not ever get it. So just be happy that you're here and you have a shot first, right? Make sure you put yourself around champions so you can start to think and act like a champion. Now, why is this important? What is the one thing that you have control over in your life? There's only one thing you have absolute control over. That's it, just one thing. What is it? Your thoughts. Your thoughts determine your actions. Your actions create a learning experience, and that experience creates a new level of understanding, and that embeds confidence as you start to get results, right? And then when you learn to control this cycle, you control your next thought, and ultimately by repeating this very exercise where you go through that sequence of events, right, that end up with a result, and you have that confidence, you got that excitement, and then you repeat that, ultimately you can win. Okay, when I looked up the definition of a champion in the Webster's Dictionary many years ago, it kind of hit me by surprise. It said, of course, that best in its class in a competition. That's what I kind of assumed it would say, but it also said something that was very different, which makes me kind of think differently about the whole thing, right? It says to advocate or fight for a cause, one who defends the cause of another. You know, when you think about mentoring or building a team or building up people, right, that's exactly what we do. We fight for a cause. We fight for your dreams and your goals. We help you get the mindset and take the actions to succeed. So we're out fighting for the cause of another when you're in the mentoring. So as you mentor other people and help them, you are the absolute definition of a champion. Is that cool or what? But then what happens? Sometimes, you know, you get over that hump, you get the good mindset, but then all of a sudden the self-talk creeps back in, right? You know, well, all that sounds great, but, you know, I'm just not champion material. You know, I just can't do what some of the other people, you know, do that watch this. You know, if you ever had thoughts like that, you know, why do we say these things to ourselves? Let's look at what most people think a champion is made of. They're born different, right? These guys, somebody was born with the silver spoon. They have a God-given talent. Some of them have a privileged life. Maybe they went to the best college. You know, I didn't go to college at all. You know, they went to the best, they've got the best connections. You know, their family's well connected in business. You know, they ended up around the right people. You know, we tell ourselves these kind of things, right? They got the breaks and I didn't. They were lucky and I'm not. Is that really true? Not at all. In a lot of cases, you know, the ones that had the biggest obstacles, but they wanted the most and they worked the hardest. How many incredibly fortunately, you know, if you think about it, I grew up on the kind of the wrong side of the tracks, and I lived pretty close to a neighborhood that had a lot of people that were really successful, you know, and they kind of had the silver spoon, right? And I didn't. But have you ever seen someone who's really been given everything that still ends up with an incredible desire to accomplish something? It really doesn't happen that way, right? Because when you have everything given to you, there's no need for desire. You know, there's and a huge desire really is what creates determination, right? And then as you go through things in life, the struggle creates resolve. And then I can tell you, you know, the elements that you have, you know, when you go through those types of things, that's what's created some of the greatest champions in history. And here's a reality check on the types of people who become champions. You ever heard of Wilma Rudolph? Born in the 1940s, extremely poor, one of 22 children. Can you imagine having 22 siblings? You know, that's craziness, you know. She was born with scarlet fever, right? And this is back in the day when, you know, pretty much everything was deadly. And she was born with scarlet fever at age 4. She wasn't even supposed to live. And she contracted polio shortly thereafter, and then she was told that she would never walk again. Well, she became the world's fastest woman, winning several gold medals in the Olympics in 1960. Now, O.J. Simpson, not a popular guy today, but he's got a great story, you know, that most people haven't heard. He also grew up very poor. He was also had a childhood disease where he had to use crutches to even walk. And he had dreams of being great, right? And he wanted to be a football player. And he would actually, you know, he would get a ride up to the stadium, and he would wait outside the stadium because he couldn't even afford to get into the games. But he would wait outside the gate for the great Jim Brown. Jim Brown was the greatest running back of all time in the 60s. And O.J. would stand there between the gates and the bus, right, and wait for Jim Brown to walk out after the game. And he told him, he said, "Jim, you know, I want you to know I'm going to break your record someday." You know, and Jim, being the gentle giant that he was, of course, he encouraged him and just passed by him every time it happened, just boarded the bus, you know, just kept encouraging him. Well, O.J., you know, worked, overcame his disabilities, and years later ended up breaking Jim Brown's record and became the best running back in the game with the all-time single-season rushing record. Have you ever heard Jim Carrey's story? No, there's a great video circulating around right now that shows him doing a commencement speech, and he kind of goes into a little bit about it. But back when I did this topic, nobody knew who Jim Carrey was and really what his story was back in the day. But really, he grew up having to help support his own family because his dad had lost his job. You know, they lost their home and they lived in a van. And he had what most people would call a crazy goal, which at the time was to earn $10 million. You know, so he wrote himself a check and he dated it. And everybody, including his dad, you know, said, you know, that's, you know, really not realistic. You know how people are. They tell you to set realistic goals. They kind of beat you down and tell you to expect what's normal, which is not much, right? And that's just kind of the norm. But Jim carried this around in his pocket in his wallet for 11 years. Went through being homeless, being hungry, and his dad ended up passing away just before he got a movie contract for the exact amount that he wrote down. It was $10 million, the exact amount that he wrote down, over a decade before. And at his dad's funeral, he slipped the check into his dad's coat pocket before they lowered him down to, his final resting place. Really cool story. So is it really true what most people think about what makes a champion? Is it really the luck of the draw? Is it being born with a God-given talent? Not at all. You ever heard the story of Jerry Rice? He played wide receiver for years with teams that most people know, but he was with the San Francisco 49ers for most of his career. But he told ESPN when they interviewed him, that he came from a really tiny school. He took the bus to the 49ers training camp. He was going to go try out, and he had a moment right there when the bus pulled up. He had a moment that kind of paralyzed him. He had fear. He said that everybody got off the bus but him. He just sat there and thought, right? He was by himself, and this was the turning point, whether he was going to go in and go for it. And he thought, I don't belong here. I'm not the fastest guy on the team at all. I don't have any collegiate records. He said I almost didn't get off the bus, and I told myself, just go do the best you can. Well, you guys know the story, right? He has pretty much every record that exists in football. He was recently picked not only to go in the Hall of Fame, but he was also picked by ESPN as the greatest football player to ever play the game at any position, right? Now, this is a guy that wasn't the fastest. He had no records. He went to a tiny school, and he almost didn't get off the bus. The greatest ever almost didn't go for it, right? So this shows you that even the greatest people, we call them GOATs, greatest of all time, some of the GOATs, the greatest of all times, even they don't know what they're capable of, before they begin the journey. So now we know even champions don't know their ability starting out, right? So usually they just start with a huge desire, right? They just work on things incredibly hard, and they never give up. Sometimes they go on even when it looks hopeless, right? And that's the difference right there. They keep going when it looks hopeless, when it looks like it's not going to work, when it looks like you're failing. And that's where most people stop. Okay, have you ever seen the movie Rudy? Now, it's a whole different training subject, but if you haven't seen that movie, you've got to get a copy and watch it. It's one of my all-time favorites about overcoming obstacles. And if you've seen it after you've watched this topic, go back and watch it again. I can promise you it will take on an entirely new meaning. But it's the theme of it is exactly what I'm talking about here, about not quitting. So do champions do the status quo? Here's another thing that happens, right, is that people hit some sort of success, right? And champions, they never do the status quo. They always go the extra mile, get up early, stay up later, do more, right? And they don't just do enough. They tap into their greatness, and usually, they've got the best work ethic of anybody. And even if they own the records, like Jerry Rice, I used to watch him work out. He had this huge hill by his house. It was almost like a mountain, and he used that. He trained year-round, and other athletes that were the greatest at their positions would sometimes come up and train with him, and before preseason, and he almost killed them. I mean, and he was 10 years older than them. Sometimes they could not keep up. He was absolutely relentless at pushing himself, and he already had all the records. He was chasing his own records, and so he just, and that's what the point I want to make is that champions are always working on themselves. And really, they are the only competitor, right? They're competing with themselves. It's not about other people, how fast they go, how much they've done, right? It's really about you, right? So focus on just getting better. I've met so many people, in this industry from all walks of life, really, that have made it huge in the industry, and it was kind of amazing to me because when I went to meetings, I had a perception, right, that salespeople made it, public speakers made it. You had to be a Zig Ziglar type. It was really eye-opening to me to go to meetings and see people speak that were formerly a maid, a single mom, a police officer, and some people that even started out homeless. one of my favorite stories of all time is a couple that I met. I met them in the 90s, but the story originated back in the 80s, and basically they lived out of a van at the beach. They were homeless, and what they did is they went to one of the huge discount stores, right, and got a bunch of soft drinks and paid 25 cents for them. They did this every single morning. They iced them down. They went back to the beach. They walked up and down the beach every day saying, Coke, Pepsi, opportunity, Coke, Pepsi, opportunity. And when people would be parched, of course, they're laying on the beach, they're thirsty, they'd call them over, right, and they'd buy a drink for $1, so they'd make some money, right, and they'd say, did you say something about opportunity? You know, when they said that, they'd prospect them, right? So there they were, you know, and they'd tell them, you know, here's where the meeting is tonight. So they would have a meeting at somebody else's house or a hotel, but they didn't have even a place to live, right? So they lived on the money they made on the beach and went up and down the beach and did their prospecting to build their business, and they went on to be multi-millionaires in the industry. So again, champions are not born that way, you know. It all rises from desire. So how do you awaken the giant within? First, as I talked about earlier, you want to immerse yourself in greatness, be around people that have greatness. But I used to lock myself in a room on Saturday night and also on Sunday afternoon, and I would study successful people. I'd watch biography. You know, if you haven't watched some of the stories on biography where you watch people that have become successful, whether it's athletes, actors and actresses, people in entertainment, watch their stories, right? I used to watch the ESPN Classic channel. They'd always be featuring great athletes, great coaches, great teams, great dynasties. Now, why would I do this? I wanted to learn how champions think. I wanted to see how they overcame adversity, right? Because when you actually watch some of these stories, you know how it is sometimes where you get on like a pity party, right? Where you've got a struggle and you got this problem and that problem, this has happened in your family and that, you know, and you start to lose perspective, right? And you focus on how much of the struggle, you know, oh poor me, you know, it's just so hard for me. Nobody has it this hard. The other people that are making it in the business, you know, they don't have these problems. But when you go see these stories of people, I can tell you the ones who become the greatest typically have overcome the most obstacles, you know. And when you watch what they go through in life and what they overcome, it changes how you think, right? Because then you put things in perspective and you see that really what you've got is absolutely nothing compared to what some people have gone through. Here's another huge tip. Champions take adversity and turn it into determination. You know, it's all energy, right? When you get energy and you don't know how to channel it, you know, you can actually take it and direct it in the wrong direction. So instead of letting it get you down, you know, what I do when I get adversity is I get a little bit pissed. You know, I get mad about it, you know, and what I do is I take that energy, I channel it into being relentless. I'll talk to more people. I'll get up a little earlier. You know, I just try to use that energy and turn it in. I'm irritated because I'm not making it right. Whenever I've had problems in the past, you know, and I can tell you, if you can take that energy and turn it into, and it's just like in an athletic event, you know, when people, you see guys, teams that get behind, you see guys walking up and down the sidelines, you know, and they're screaming at their teammates, you know, come on, you know, we can't let this happen, you know, and so you take it and you get pissed about it, right? And I can tell you, the human spirit is absolutely incredible. So if you got to constantly watch, you know, people do incredible things, overcome obstacles, channel adversity, you know, and turn it into determination, you know, and what you can do is you can overcome pretty much anything. Now ask yourself this: do you want to stay where you are right now in life, or are you ready for a change? Are you ready to work hard? You know, in closing, I want to read something that I've held close to me for many, many years. It's a short segment of a speech that the late great Vince Lombardi gave. You know, it's called "What It Takes to Be Number One." Winning is not a sometime thing; it's an all-the-time thing. You don't win once in a while. You don't do things once in a while right. You do them right all the time. Winning is a habit. Unfortunately, so is losing. There's no room for second place. There's only room for one place in my game, and that's first place. I've finished second twice in my time at Green Bay. I don't ever want to finish second again. There's a second place bowl game, and it's a game for losers. And it's always going to be that way. You know, the Americans have a zeal to be first at anything. You know, we want to win and win and win. Every time a football player goes to apply his trade or his craft, he's got to play from the ground up, from the soles of his shoes right up to his head. Each inch of him has to play. Some guys play with their heads, and that's okay. But you've also got to be smart to be number one in any business. But more importantly, you've got to play with your heart. Every fiber of your body has to be focused on winning. If you're ever lucky enough to find a guy with a lot of head and a lot of heart, he's going to come out off the field first place. He's never going to come off the field second. You're running a football team is no different than running any other kind of organization, whether it's an army, a political party, or a business. The principles are the same. The object is to win, to beat the other guy, and maybe that sounds hard or cruel, but I don't think it is. It is a reality of life. Men are competitive, and the most competitive games draw the most competitive men. That's why they're there, to compete, to know the rules and objectives, and then they go play the game. The objective is to win fairly, squarely, by the rules, but to win. I don't say these things because I believe in the brute nature of man or men must be brutalized to be competitive. I believe in God, and I believe in human decency. But I firmly believe that any man in his finest hour, the greatest fulfillment of all he holds dear, is that moment when he's worked his heart out in a good cause and he lies exhausted on the field of battle, victorious. Are you ready to become a champion? Are you ready to be what you were meant to be? Let's go do this together. I'm Tim Edwards. This is the High Skill Academy video. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.